and thank you for joining us for today's educational webinar with Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. I'm Kathy Riley, the Associate Director of Programs at CSCLA, and I'm honored to welcome you to this week's webinar titled Caring for Yourself Through Food. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is a premier nonprofit organization providing vital social and emotional support to families facing cancer, including patients, caregivers, and their loved ones, all at no cost. And our programs include support groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs such as this one. If you'd like to learn more about our services or watch past webinars, please visit cancersupportla.org. And before I introduce today's wonderful speaker, please note that your video and microphone are automatically disabled for this webinar. You may, however, enter your questions into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window at any time. And the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And we may not be able to get to all of your questions today, but our presenter is going to share her contact information at the end of the webinar. Saori Yen is a registered dietitian and a board certified specialist in oncology nutrition with a master's degree in nutritional science. As an outpatient oncology dietitian at Cedars-Sinai Cancer Patient and Family Support Program, Saori specializes in providing individualized nutrition counseling before, during, and after cancer treatment. She is passionate about learning from other cultures and incorporating cultural foods into an anti-cancer eating pattern. And she believes that evidence-based nutrition information should be accessible and approachable for all. Saori, please welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will let you take it from here and come back for the Q&A.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm happy to be here and do another webinar for your organization. Let me share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so as Kathy mentioned, I'm one of the outpatient oncology dietitians at Cedars-Sinai, and I'm a part of this great group called Patient and Family Support Program. So we consist of dietitians, social workers, nurses, chaplains, psychiatrists, supportive care medicine doctors, and also rehab doctors. So, we are here to support our patients through the journey from different angles, but today's focus is going to be about self-care and nutrition. So caring for yourself through food. And please feel free to put in all your questions in the Q&A so that we can get to them at the end. There's no stupid questions. This is a safe space, so don't hesitate. So let's get started. So today we're going to talk about focusing on nutrition as a part of your self-care routine. So I want you to think about, do you have a self-care routine that you practice on a daily basis or a regular basis? If so, what does it look like? Does it involve nutrition? If you don't have a self-care routine, are there certain obstacles that get in the way, and how can we overcome them? And we'll go over optimal food choices after a cancer diagnosis. We know that there's a lot of confusion and cancer nutrition myth out there. So that's something that I address on a regular basis as an oncology dietitian. And lastly, we'll go over managing nutrition-related side effects to feel your best. And there are many different strategies to do so. So first, we're going to talk about nutrition as a part of your self-care routine. So again, think about your own self-care routine if you have any. And again, like we say, it's practicing self-care routine. So the more we do it, the better we get at it and the easier it becomes. So let's go over the definition of self-care first. So this is according to the Oxford Languages or the Oxford Dictionary. Self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. We know that a cancer diagnosis is probably the worst thing that can happen in someone's life. And, there's a lot of stress associated with it. People might have anxiety or, feel very stressed after the diagnosis. They go through, treatment plans and they go through the treatment. So this is the perfect time to kind of shift the focus, take a step back and focusing on taking a holistic approach and focusing on health care, self-care as you go through this. And studies do show, and in particular, looking at patients who are affected by cancer, that there are definite benefits of practicing self-care. So here are a couple studies that showed that when people going through a cancer treatment or after a diagnosis, when they do focus on self-care, they noticed enhanced mental health, improved health and better understanding of disease, as well as better management of treatment-related side effects and control of their symptoms, and improved quality of life. So I would want that for all of you. So let's see how we can practice this. And we know that there are different forms of self-care. So today we'll focus on nutrition, but let's not forget other important forms. So it could be movement, it could be mindfulness or meditation, it could be deep breathing, it could be getting adequate and good quality rest, and social connection. So again, sometimes we want to focus on one thing, but after we focus and learn something new, let's take a step back to see, if all aspects of our life are taken care of. So nutrition as a form of self-care, it can look different for many different people. People have different starting point and people have different nutrition related goals. And ideally, I hope that you do have access to a dietitian, especially somebody who focuses on oncology nutrition, so that they can help you and provide individualized counseling. But regardless of what your nutrition related goal is, I do recommend to start slowly and take baby steps, because studies show that, for long-term success, you don't want to make changes that are too drastic and difficult to sustain. And we also encourage you to be curious instead of being judgmental. There's no need for self-criticism. So for example, if you feel that, let's say after a diagnosis, someone could tell me, I've been just eating comfort foods because, I just, I don't feel well. I'm going through something very challenging and difficult. So instead of being judgmental, like I'm not eating the best, think about what's missing, what would make you feel better, and focus on that. And then similarly, we can focus on what we can add to our eating pattern as opposed to focusing on what we should be avoiding or what we should be eliminating from our diet or eating pattern, because most often your favorite foods can fit into a healthy eating pattern. And because no one's perfect, we want to focus on progress and feel encouraged as opposed to trying to aim for perfection. Other things to focus on, again, sometimes you want to take a step back and look at the big picture of things. So we always say that your eating pattern matters more than anything. So some patients might ask, can I eat this thing? Or I just had a patient email me yesterday or today asking, can I have an occasional strawberry milkshake, or does that have too much sugar? My question would be, what does the rest of your eating pattern look like? Because, some added sugar can fit into your eating pattern as long as most of what you eat is healthful. So focus on the eating pattern more so than the individual meals, nutrients, or foods. And again, that's how favorite foods might fit into your eating pattern. And we also want to focus on what's going well. Maybe you're hydrating well. Maybe you're taking, certain medications like pain meds or anti-nausea medications that are recommended, and that's helping you feel better. I'm sure there are things that you're doing already that you should be proud of and you should celebrate. So focus on the positives. And going back to how, well, kind of like thinking about self-criticism or self-talk, words do have power. So how we talk to ourselves in our head can make a difference. So things like, I have to do this, I have to do that. You can rephrase it by saying, I get to do this or I get to do that. And we want to steer away from labeling certain food as good or bad. There can be a whole spectrum. And going back to like the milkshake example, if somebody doesn't have the best appetite and all they can tolerate is a milkshake can be a good acceptable option. It will provide calories, it can have some protein, it can have some calcium and vitamin D. So, there are beneficial nutrients and things that some people might label as bad food. That's off limits. And be open-minded, because what you're going through is likely new for you. And for the time being, you might benefit from trying things you've never tried before. Maybe you're feeling tired and you're not used to, let's say, ordering groceries delivered to you, but maybe now is the best time. Or maybe you're not used to accepting help from like family and loved ones because you're used to being the caregiver. So now is to try something new to help you get through this period. A few other things, like I mentioned, focusing on the eating pattern is important, but so is liberalizing your diet if needed. So sometimes I get a patient who is very determined and very health conscious, but to the point where they're only, so kind of like labeling food good and bad, they're only willing to eat what they considered healthy enough. And sometimes if they don't have a good appetite, if they have GI symptoms that make it difficult for them to eat during treatment, that can lead to malnutrition because they don't have enough options to sustain a healthy weight. So restricting too much, if it's unnecessary, can sometimes do more harm than good. So we want to be careful about that. And dietitian can help you to see if it's too restrictive or if it's adequate. And again, choose convenience, make it as easy as possible, especially, you have different appointments, you have different treatments, you might be feeling tired, exhausted. So, accept help from loved ones who are offering to help. Let them know specifically how they can help you. And I hope that you get to collaborate with a dietitian so that, you get, again, individualized recommendations to help you feel better. So I realized that the chat box may not be working, but I want you to think about, is there anything you would like to add to your self-care routine? Or perhaps, this is new for you. Is there, something that you would like to start, maybe starting today or tomorrow, so that you can start practicing daily self-care routine? And it can be nutrition, but it can be other things as well. So now let's talk about optimal food choices after a cancer diagnosis. This is another topic that is very, very common for me as an oncology dietitian. So it can be, a patient coming in after a diagnosis. Some people just ask, what should I eat? What should I avoid? Can I eat this? Is this bad for cancer? Does this feed cancer? I changed my diet drastically and I'm avoiding these food groups. So there's a lot of confusion and misconception. And again, there are general guidelines, but you might need specific guidance depending on your situation. So the foundation of optimal food choices after a cancer diagnosis is that you do need adequacy and variety. So meaning you do need enough calories to help maintain a healthy weight for you. So it's not just the weight that we're worried about, but we want you to really maintain your muscle mass during treatment so that you feel strong, so that you can recover or prep for treatment, whether it's surgery or chemo or radiation. Um, we really want to prevent malnutrition as much as possible. And of course, in terms of calories, we want to focus on nutrient dense foods as much as possible instead of empty calories. But maybe there are certain days, depending on how you feel, you just want comfort foods. And those times you might need to shift your priority because you're just trying to meet your calorie needs. And you might not feel like eating healthy foods, and that's okay too. Once you start to feel better, you can just go back to trying to eat healthier foods. And protein, of course, is very important. Most people have increased needs during treatment. Protein is very important to build or maintain your muscle mass. It can help heal tissues, especially after surgery, rebuild cells, which is very important after chemotherapy as your red blood cell, white blood cell platelets are affected. And it can also boost your immune system and fight infections. So very important to include some kind of protein with your meals and snacks. And fluids or hydration is crucial too. You don't want to be dehydrated. You can feel more tired. It can, worsen nausea. It can worsen constipation. We're made with mostly water and, as a human. So we need fluids to move nutrients throughout your body and also to eliminate waste products out of our body. And other nutrients that are important. Unfortunately, I don't have time to discuss everything in detail today, but we do want, quality carbs, fats, vitamins, minerals, fiber, different antioxidants coming from colorful fruits and vegetables, phytonutrients coming from plant foods, prebiotics and probiotics, preferably coming from whole foods. Now, when it comes to, a diet or eating pattern that's recommended after a cancer diagnosis or to reduce the risk of cancer occurrence, there is a lot of data, and these leading organizations like the World Cancer Research Fund, American Institute for Cancer Research, and American Cancer Society agree on this general eating pattern. And that is, a diet or eating pattern that's filled with whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and pulses or legumes, such as beans or lentils or chickpeas. We want that to be a major part of your diet. And this can look different from many people because, you all probably have different favorite whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and pulses. And you don't have to like everything. It's okay to focus on the things that you already like. And if you're feeling up for it, please feel free to try new ones. Make sure you're getting a variety. But if you don't feel like trying anything new, you don't have to start, especially in the middle of treatment, you don't have to start like eating raw kale or something if you don't like it. Maybe there are alternatives like baby spinach or something that you already like. So, and I like to include this chart because we want to think about how foods and nutrients found in foods can help the processes of cancer fighting. So on the left side, there are different biological processes that we all have in our system, in our body, that are considered cancer fighting. And on the right side, these are different nutrients shown to support these processes. So I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see on the left side, you might see things like detoxification of carcinogens, which are cancer-causing, I'm looking for the word, detoxification of carcinogens, cancer-causing, I can't find the word, cancer-causing, I'll just leave it at carcinogen, or repairing DNA, or induction of apoptosis and initiated cells. That means, cells that are mutated that could turn into malignant or cancer cells. We want those cells to, go through cell death. So that's important. We want inflammation to be suppressed, etc. And on the right side, we see different types of nutrients that you might be familiar with. different vitamins, different polyphenols, omega-3, curcumin, soy isoflavones. So these are, again, there is a whole variety, and you can get these nutrients from a lot of different foods. So that's why there's no one diet that is recommended. Again, it can look different for different people. And since we don't necessarily go out to like buy supplements to, reduce the risk of cancer, we want to focus on food. So what do those nutrients from that table, what does that look like on our plate? So again, going back to like the American Institute of Cancer Research recommendation or the American Cancer Society recommendation, another good way to think about it is something visual. So when we say the majority of your food coming from, those whole grains, vegetables, fruits, pulses, it can look like, trying to make our plate, at least 2/3 of our plate coming from plants. So here we have on the left side, the old American plate, which is filled with a large piece of steak and mashed potatoes with butter and peas, which are starchy vegetables. But on the other hand, what's recommended is called the New American plate, where we have a lean protein, like a piece of chicken. And then we have a whole grain like quinoa, which is also high in protein. And we have a variety of colorful non-starchy vegetables like the broccoli, which is a type of cruciferous vegetable that we recommend, tomatoes with lycopene, and colorful zucchini, bell peppers, etc. And again, I don't ever want to forget about cultural foods or, non like standard American food, because whatever your, background is or your favorite ethnic cuisine is, they can likely fit into this anti-cancer eating pattern. So like the shrimp tacos, or maybe this like Asian, like Buddha bowl or something like that, or Indian food, they can still have lots of plant foods, lots of colorful foods, and support your needs. And again, I wanted to take a step back and share that the American Institute for Cancer Research, they call this a blueprint to beat cancer. And it goes over not just nutrition, but a few other things too. So, these are recommendations for cancer risk reduction, be physically active, and then also for reducing the risk of recurrence as well. So we already talked about the whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. The recommendation is to limit consumption of red meat, and especially processed meat, limiting consumption of sugar sweetened drinks, limiting consumption of fast foods, avoiding or limiting alcohol consumption. And there's a specific recommendation to not use supplements for cancer prevention. And there are multiple studies that show that these recommendations actually work in terms of reducing the risk of recurrence and mortality, which I'm sure matters to everybody here. So there was a recent study that was published this year that looked at over 1,000 patients with high-risk breast cancer. And for those who adhere to these guidelines, the American Cancer Society and American Institute for Cancer Research Prevention recommendations, those people were associated with 37% reduced hazard of breast cancer recurrence and 58% reduced hazard of mortality. So after looking at these slides, I want you to think about if there's anything you would like to add to your current eating pattern to kind of follow the recommendations to see what makes sense for you. So now let's talk about nutrition-related side effects, how to manage them so that you feel your best. Some people have poor appetite. It could be related to the cancer diagnosis itself, actually. Some people feel very anxious, and that can lead to poor appetite, even before starting treatment. But of course, certain treatments can cause poor appetite. So the cause can be different for everybody. But regardless, again, we really want to prevent malnutrition, unintentional weight loss, muscle wasting, weakening of your immune system. So even if you don't have the best appetite, we still encourage that you eat and nourish your body. And in order to do that, if you can't have your regular sized meal, we have to go for the small frequent meals. So what that means is, after you wake up within the first hour, try to have your breakfast. And maybe every 3 hours or so while you're awake, try to have something small, even if it's half of what you're used to eating, even if it's a snack or a smoothie or kid-sized meal, anything helps and adds up. And we recommend to eat by the clock, meaning don't rely on your hunger cues or appetite, because if you do, you might skip a meal, you might never eat because you're not hungry, and that can lead to malnutrition. We do want you to focus on high calorie, high protein foods, especially the nutrient dense ones if you can tolerate them. So things like chicken salad, egg salad, tuna salad, full fat Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, maybe avocado toast with Ezekiel bread. And when people don't have a great appetite, they might be able to tolerate liquids better than solid foods. So go for the high calorie, high protein drinks, whether it's homemade or store purchased. There are many great options for you. Nausea. Nausea can be a common side effect. Thankfully, there are a lot of good medications to manage them. So, make sure that your team knows if you have uncontrolled nausea. The recommendation typically is to take it at the first sign of queasiness and not wait until it's too late. If you're about to throw up, it's not going to work as well. And it is recommended to take before eating if you have nausea, as opposed to starting to eat or after eating when you're already feeling nauseous. And if the anti-nausea medication that you have, you're taking it as prescribed, but if it's not controlling the nausea, please let your doctor or nurse know. There's typically something else they can add, or they can adjust the regimen. And when you're feeling nauseous, you might not feel like eating, but avoiding if avoiding meals or skipping meals can actually worsen nausea, because if your stomach is too empty, then the stomach acid can become more active, and that can make you more nauseous. So again, going back to eating by the clock, you do want to put a little something in your stomach every few hours or so. And things that are tolerated best tend to be something that's non-offensive, something like dry, starchy foods that don't have a smell. That's something that's not very offensive. So maybe things like crackers or toast, pretzels, dry cereals, rice crackers, rice cakes. Those can be good options to help settle your stomach. And after you feel a little bit better, you might be able to eat other things like protein foods, etc. And hydration is also important to help with nausea. You don't want to gulp or drink a lot of fluids at once, because that can trigger nausea. You want to sip on liquids throughout the day, especially clear liquids. You might want to stay away from things that are too heavy or rich. So again, things like clear protein drinks that you can purchase or make yourself. You can try broth, fruit juices, sports drinks, ginger ale, ginger tea. Those can all be helpful to prevent dehydration. Constipation can be another common side effect. It can be because of pain meds. It can be because of anti-nausea meds. It could be because you're tired or you're not able to, move as much as before. So hydration is very important. Drink at least 8 to 10 cups of fluids per day. A dietitian can help, figure out exactly how much you need specifically. And it's not just the amount, but also think about what types of fluids, because hot beverage or caffeinated beverage or things like prune juice can promote the bowel to move a little bit more than others. And when it comes to constipation, we want to focus on a type of fiber called insoluble fiber. And those are found in things like fruits and vegetables with edible skin and seeds. So think about berries or kiwi or dried fruits. Those can be helpful for constipation, along with other high fiber-rich foods like whole grains or legumes like the bean family or nuts and seeds. And when you do increase your fiber intake, make sure that you are also increasing hydration, because if you only increase the fiber intake, that can actually block you more than help you. And movement, like I mentioned, whatever you can safely tolerate. It can be walking, it can be, stretching or light exercise. You can also massage the area in the direction of where your large intestine, moves the stool. That can be helpful as well. And if you are interested or have questions about taking stool softeners or laxatives, please ask your provider to see what's most appropriate for you. And on the other hand, people can develop diarrhea for a variety of reasons. If you do have diarrhea, there are certain things that can exacerbate it. So stay away from certain things that can irritate the GI tract. So things like alcohol, caffeine, spicy foods, foods that have a lot of insoluble fiber, which is helpful for constipation, but not for diarrhea, or high fat foods or lactose if you're sensitive, or if people have diarrhea for a long time, even if you're not normally lactose sensitive, people can become temporarily lactose sensitive. So keep that in mind as well. And when you have diarrhea, there's another type of fiber that can be helpful. That's called soluble fiber. And you may have heard of the BRAT diet, which stands for banana, rice, applesauce, and toast. So those are all rich in soluble fiber that help to kind of form the stool. So it's less runny. So in addition to bananas and applesauce, you can also try fruits and vegetables without the skin or seeds, and white starches like rice, white bread, white pasta. And hydration for diarrhea is also very important because you don't want to become dehydrated. If you have a lot of diarrhea, you're losing not just your fluids, but also electrolytes. So a good rule of thumb is to, for each episode of diarrhea, replenish with 1 cup or 240 cc or 8 ounces of electrolyte-rich fluid. So things like sports drinks, broth, coconut water, things like that. And if your diarrhea is so bad, maybe like more than 4 times a day or something like that, talk to your provider to see if they recommend any antidiarrheal medication. Just a couple more. Fatigue can be a real challenge for a lot of patients. Going back to convenience, make it as easy as possible for yourself. So it depends on whether you have, whether you're going through this alone or you have good family or, family support from friends or neighbors, but ready to eat things that are easy to make or assemble. Those are, it's helpful to plan ahead so that you have things in the fridge, freezer, pantry, etc. If you can have people cook and meal prep for you and put individual portions in the fridge and freezer, that's very helpful. And again, try maybe grocery or meal deliveries and to make things easier for you. And when you are tired, you don't want to skip your meals because remember that food provides energy and fuel for you. So try to eat at least every 4 to 5 hours. You don't want to, you don't want to be on an empty stomach. You'll feel more tired. And same with hydration. If you're dehydrated, you can feel more tired. So drink at least 8 cups of fluids. It doesn't have to be just water. It can be, any fluid of your choice. And movement is shown to be very helpful to combat fatigue, especially cancer-related fatigue. So again, any movement that you can safely tolerate, if you can get outside, if the weather is tolerable, and keep in mind, being too sedentary can cause muscle loss and you can actually feel more tired because of not being active. And lastly, I do want to focus on nutrition as it relates to mental health, whether it's anxiety or depression. Those are very, very common for those affected by cancer. So when it comes to improving the mental health status, we really want to focus on nutrient density and balance of your meal. So what that means is, again, instead of just focusing on any calories, if we can focus on nutrient dense foods like the whole foods, minimally processed foods like the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, as opposed to empty calories, that can actually help with the mental health status. And when it comes to balance of your meal and snack, meals and snacks, try to see if you have some kind of protein, fiber, and healthy fat in a meal or a snack. And that will help to stabilize your blood sugar and make you feel better. And when it comes to the healthy fats, we often talk about things like omega-3s or olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, seeds. If you like fish, go ahead and choose fatty fish like twice a week, things like salmon, anchovies, sardines, and smaller fish are also a good source of calcium. And if you don't like fish or if you don't eat fish, try some alternatives like plant-based, like flaxseed oil, chia seeds, walnuts, flaxseed, like ground flaxseed. Those are good options for omega-3s. And for mental health, it's recommended to limit or avoid alcohol and limit caffeine. So other things you can enjoy, maybe and make like a spa water with berries or sliced citrus like lime, lemon, maybe mint, cucumber. You can also try sparkling water, herbal tea, golden milk made with turmeric and a hint of black pepper. Those are good options to stay hydrated. And lastly, if possible, share meals with loved ones, whether in person or even virtually, like over Zoom or over FaceTime, so that it's more of a pleasant, pleasurable experience. So now I want you to think about if there's anything you would like to try to manage, if any of these side effects apply to you, is there anything you would like to try so that you can feel your best? So in summary, the key takeaways, as you saw, nutrition is such an important part of your self-care routine that you can practice on a daily basis, and it can make you feel better and stronger. And for optimal food choices after a cancer diagnosis, think about, are you getting adequate foods? Are you getting a good variety of foods? Are most of your foods whole foods as opposed to ultra processed foods? Are you eating enough plant foods? And don't forget to incorporate your favorite foods. And there are many different strategies, more than what I shared today, to manage nutrition-related side effects to feel your best. So again, if possible, try to work with an oncology dietitian if you or your loved ones have nutrition-related side effects. And some people have a specific condition where the recommendations that I shared might not apply to them. For example, some people could be on a fluid restriction, or some people have dietary restrictions. So that's definitely a good indicator that individualized counseling is needed. Some references, and that's all I have. Thank you for your attention and participation.
Thank you so much, Saori, for that informative webinar. That was incredible information. I know I learned a tremendous amount. I wanted to invite questions from all of you. If you have them, please type them into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your Zoom window at this time. We have already received many questions, so I will start with some of those. One of the questions we first received is, once you become aware of how important it is to eat a healthy diet, what are your suggestions for long-term maintenance of that?
So it depends on where you're starting. So, what does your baseline look like? Because I've had a patient, who told me that he had a very unhealthy diet. And after a diagnosis, he was able to drastically change his diet and maintain it. But I think that's a rare case, because a lot of people, I think a lot of people know that it's better to eat healthy, but that's maybe it's not as appetizing, or it's not really, a normal pattern that they're used to. So I would say, focus on certain nutrition goals and make it as specific as possible. So healthy eating can mean many different things. Does that mean eating more fruits and vegetables? Does that mean, trying to stay more hydrated? Are you trying to build more muscles? Are you trying to eat less fast food? So I think it's important to kind of pinpoint what it is that makes the biggest difference to you, and then focus on that, and then master that, and then kind of move on to the next, specific goal.
Thank you. We have another question about a vegetarian omega-3 source. This individual says flax is the only one that they know. Are there others that you could recommend?
Yeah, so I included some on the slide, but so flax is great, ground flaxseed, same with flaxseed oil, but also walnuts are good, chia seeds are good. For people who take supplements, they're algae-based supplements as well that are rich in omega-3.
Wonderful. I know that you talked about sugars and use of those in your diet. And someone is asking a question about whether citruses like grapefruit can be added to their diet.
Yeah, so grapefruit is kind of a notorious fruit that may interfere with certain medications. So I would double check. I don't know what your condition or your treatment plan or your medication list is. So grapefruit is a tricky one, just because there could be a potential interaction. So I would check with the nurse, doctor, or pharmacist. But other than that, other citrus typically are, you can incorporate.
For an individual that has estrogen positive breast cancer, is it safe to eat foods like lentils and chickpeas and soy?
Yes, yes, that's a great question. And I'm happy to share that you can. In particular, the talk about phytoestrogen, so estrogen coming from plant foods, there's a lot of confusion and fear around it, especially for estrogen positive cancers. But things like isoflavone in whole soy foods, so things like the soy milk or tofu, tempeh, edamame, those are actually now shown to be protective, rather than something to avoid. So if you enjoy them, you can definitely incorporate them. At this time, there's not enough evidence to either recommend for or against supplements in terms of isoflavone supplements or anything like that. So we recommend to stay away.
That's great information. Thank you for that. When looking at the composition of your plate, if you recommended that 2/3 of the plate, come from plants, and someone is wondering, do whole grains count as plants like brown rice? And
Yes,
then part two is, can someone do 100%?
yes. Definitely. So nothing wrong with being vegan or a vegetarian. It can be difficult for some people to give up animal products. So it's at least 2/3 of your plate. So if you want to do more, nobody's going to stop you. Maybe more benefits.
Then another question, are there any leafy greens that are safe to eat during chemotherapy?
I wonder what leafy greens are not safe to eat during chemo. So sometimes I wonder if it comes from food safety concerns. I had a patient who received treatment somewhere else and then came to Cedars and then told me that, she was told to avoid all raw fruits and vegetables during treatment. So that would, include green leafy vegetables. But the current recommendation is to follow food safety guidelines. So as long as the green leafy vegetables or other produce are fresh and well washed, they are allowed during chemo, unless I don't know if there's something I'm missing, if it has anything to do with certain medications. But the only thing I can think about that might not be recommended might be sprouts. If your white blood cell is low, because it's a high, foodborne illness risk produce. So the recommendation, let's say if somebody's going through like bone marrow transplant or something, it's recommended while their, white blood cell is low to avoid raw sprouts, but they can still eat them if they're cooked.
Great, thank you. And then this is a scheduling question. So if a chemo infusion is midday, would you recommend eating normally before that chemo session or waiting until afterwards?
So I wonder if the question is about maybe you've never had chemo before and you don't know how you're going to react. If that's the case, if it's midday, I would still have maybe a light breakfast so you're not on an empty stomach. At least at Cedar Sinai, we offer complimentary like sandwiches and snacks and things like that. So if you do get hungry, you can eat while getting treatment, and hopefully they're giving you adequate pre-medication so that your nausea is covered, and you feel comfortable while getting treated. And some people bring their own snacks and drinks to the infusion center as well.
And then another question has to do with chronic low white blood cell count, even though treatment was a few years back. Are there foods you recommend that could increase white blood cell count?
Yeah, I wonder what's causing the chronic low white blood cells. There's certainly certain cancer diagnosis that can do that. But it's a combination of different things. You definitely need adequate calories. So I don't know what your nutrition status looks like. If you're eating well and maintaining a healthy weight, are you getting enough protein as well? That's very important, because amino acids are building blocks for all the blood cells. So keep in mind that you're, getting adequate nutrition, but there's no, magic food that's going to boost the white blood cell, just like one single food. I wish there were, but we typically look at, your current nutrition status and your overall intake, adequate calories, adequate protein, and other nutrients.
And then someone is asking if we can show the resource slide again, but I think
Yeah.
instead of going back to that, because you've got your contact information here, I think this is a good time for me to mention that you have provided us your slides. And so if you would like a copy of today's slides, you can email info@cancersupportla.org. And we will email you those slides. And then there's a question that I'm not, I'll just read it to you. I don't know what golden milk is. Someone is saying, I want to try golden milk, but do they
Yeah.
need to limit dairy?
So golden milk it's like a latte with turmeric. So it can be cold or hot. So I don't know the participant's background, but if you're not sensitive to dairy, you don't need to limit dairy. For patients affected by prostate cancer, for example, the recommendation is to limit to 1 dairy per day. But if that doesn't apply to you, and if you like dairy, if you don't have any issues tolerating it, you don't need to limit dairy. But also keep in mind that dairy can look like many different things. So it can be something like with probiotics like Greek yogurt or kefir, but it can also be like processed American cheese. So I always, recommend more nutrient dense, high quality foods, but you can have the milk to make the golden milk. But if you prefer alternatives like soy milk or other non-dairy milk, that's okay too.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how much protein do we need in our diet?
Yeah, so that depends on, who you are, what you're going through. But typically, and then also keep in mind that some people with, like, for example, kidney condition, they need to limit their protein intake or increase if they're on dialysis, etc. But in general, if you don't have any kidney issues, but if you do have a cancer diagnosis, it will be at least 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. So let's say somebody weighs 150 pounds. In kilograms, that's 68 kilograms. If you multiply that by 1.2, that's about 82 grams of protein per day. So you want to divide that up throughout the day. Also keep in mind that we can't just eat all the protein in one sitting. It's not going to get used up very efficiently for muscle building. So you want to limit to maybe 25 or 30 grams of protein per meal or snack. So again, spread it out throughout the day.
And then another question, it's a statement and then a question, that it's difficult not to have something sweet like a pastry or a cookie. And do you have recommendations for something that's dessert-like as a replacement, but not fruit?
Yeah, maybe tired of fruits. So I wonder, I don't know if there's a need to eliminate pastries and cookies from your life completely for the rest of your life. Because if you can always eat a smaller portion of it and then balance it out with something else like, nuts or I wonder where the concern is coming from. Is it because of the sugar content? Is it the butter in the pastries or cookies? Is it because it's a dessert? If, for example, if you're concerned about the sugar content, then there are a lot of, for example, like keto options these days using like monk fruit or stevia. So those could be good alternatives, but I guess it would depend on what the main concern is that you feel that you can't have pastries or cookies.
Thank you. And then you addressed this in your presentation, but maybe you could review it for us. There's a question: does sugar feed cancer cells? And so that question is here. And I will say at registration, we received several questions that were similar. So if you could just talk about that again for a minute or two.
Of course. I think I get this question at least every other day from patients. So the short answer is yes and no. It depends on what sugar you're talking about, because if we think about glucose, which is in our body, which is a type of sugar that fuels all our cells, right? Cancer cells or healthy cells. Yes, glucose can go to cancer cells. But having said that, glucose comes from healthy food, not just pure sugar, but all our healthy fruits, vegetables, whole grains. They also do break down into glucose. And just because somebody stops eating, let's say, white sugar, it doesn't mean you're going to get rid of glucose in your body, which would be a problem because our brain, for example, thrives on glucose. So our healthy cells need glucose, a type of sugar. And unfortunately, cancer cells are very smart and they adapt easily. And we were talking about this, Kathy, but cancer is not just one disease, right? There are more than 100 different types. So there are dozens of nutrients identified to fuel cancer cells. So, unfortunately, the evidence doesn't show that if you stop eating added sugars like the white sugar or honey or maple syrup, that it's going to starve cancer cells. And it also doesn't show that if you eat a little bit of added sugar, it's not going to feed the cancer cells any more than it's going to feed your healthy cells. So there is a recommendation though, again, focusing on nutrient dense foods, avoiding, empty calories as much as possible. If somebody wants to be very specific, the more conservative guideline or recommendation by the American Heart Association is to limit to less than 6% of your total calories coming from added sugars. So you can do the math to see how many grams that is per day, and you can look at the nutrition facts label.
We have a comment that I just love the support that comes from our community for one another, even in these webinar sessions. But this individual says, for the person who just asked, that they gave up sugar and love making yogurt. dessert, and yogurt with dates and berries and seeds. So I thought that was a really wonderful compliment. Um, a final question, and then we've reached the end of our time. But someone is wanting to know about alkaline water, sirsop, apricot kernels. That those are things that are rumored to help prevent cancer, but don't know if there's any scientific evidence for those things.
Yeah, so the alkaline water or the alkaline diet, no, it's not shown to help with cancer. So cancer cells thrive in acidic environment, but it's, the argument could be that the cancer cells are causing the acidic environment, not that the acidic environment is causing cancer. And we all have different pH levels in different parts of our body. Stomach being very acidic. So regardless of how much alkaline water we drink or how much alkaline foods we eat, it's not going to change the pH of our stomach. And it's definitely not going to change the pH of our blood. It has to be regulated and maintain a safe level between 7.35 and 7.45. If that changes, that means you'll be in the ER. So alkaline diet doesn't change the pH of your it could maybe change the pH of your urine, but it doesn't change, temporarily, but it doesn't change the pH of your blood, or it doesn't show to help with cancer. So other things like I think the apricot kernels or the apricot seeds, I had that question from a patient today, actually. You know, it's interesting because it's actually shown to be poisonous, and it's not. That's how it's labeled by the FDA. So it's not recommended. It's not safe. And whenever you have questions about supplements or herbs or anything like that, please ask an oncology dietitian, at least share with a nurse or a doctor. And if they don't know, they can refer to an oncology dietitian. And then we'll let you know what level of evidence there is, what the concerns might be, and then let you know if there's any, because we all want the best for patients. We're not trying to, hold anything back, but if something could harm you, we have to let you know. And if the evidence is limited, because some things can show anti-cancer properties in like a petri dish or mice, but it doesn't mean it's safe or it has the same effect in humans.
And then in closing, will you mention your Instagram?
Oh yeah, it's
And I think I have your handle right. Is it at cancer_nutrition_tips?
yeah, I think if you
Okay.
just put in cancer nutrition tips, it'll pop up.
Okay. So I put that into the chat, but take a few seconds and tell us about that and what people will find if they follow you.
Oh, yeah. So, I just try to share because I know that the oncology dietitian access to one is very limited. And, I don't know, it's a blessing that I found this career because I can really try to share what I've learned over the years, not just with patients, but with like families and friends. And that's why I do it in Japanese and English, so that like people that I know can benefit from it. But I'm always open to suggestions. So if there are certain topics that you're interested in and you want me to share about it on Instagram or something like that, just, send me a message. You can also email me too. I'll be doing more webinars. So if there are certain topics of interest, let me know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Saori, for your time today. We really, really appreciate you giving so generously of your time and sharing this wonderful information with our community. And I want to thank you, our attendees today, for your engagement with us and for your thoughtful questions. And if you would like to learn more about Cancer Support Community, go to our website, cancersupportla.org. And again, if you want a copy of today's slides, I will put our info at Cancer Support in the chat one more time. And please email us there if you would like a copy of today's slides, and we will ensure that you get those. But have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.